I remember the exact sound of the hospital room before everything changed, the soft beeping of the monitor, the faint hum of the air conditioning, the footsteps of a nurse passing by the door. Everyone says the moment you hold your baby for the first time is unforgettable. They say time stops. They say something inside you awakens, like a light switching on, flooding your chest with warmth. But for me, nothing switched on. When the nurse placed my daughter in my arms, I expected a surge burning, overwhelming love like in the stories, in the movies, in those perfect Instagram videos of mothers crying as they meet their babies. I waited for it. I begged for it silently, and instead, I felt hollow. I stared at her tiny face, her trembling lips, her closed eyes, the way her fingers curled instinctively in the air, searching for something, someone. She looked so fragile, so breakable. I knew I should have felt protective. I knew I should have felt something, anything. But there was a cold silence inside me. I tried to hide it. I smiled, I think. Or maybe it was just the ghost of one. My husband looked at me with this expression of pure, exhausted joy. He kissed my forehead, whispering, "You did it. Look at her. She's perfect." I nodded because that's what I was supposed to do. That's what a mother is supposed to do. But inside, a single thought echoed, why don't I feel anything? No one warns you about this part. They warn you about contractions, about stitches, about breastfeeding pain, but no one warns you about the emotional emptiness that can hit you like a wave you never saw coming. A nurse walked in, checking vitals, adjusting blankets, offering that overly sweet smile nurses use when they think a new mom is overwhelmed. "How do you feel, sweetheart? You look radiant, radiant." If only she knew. I wanted to tell her I felt detached. I wanted to tell her I felt like I was watching myself from the outside, like the moment wasn't mine. I wanted to tell her I felt like I had been handed a stranger's baby. Instead, I nodded again. "I'm okay. Just tired." Tired was acceptable. Tired was normal. Tired wouldn't make anyone look at me with suspicion. Tired wouldn't get me evaluated or questioned or monitored. The nurse handed me a glass of water, told me I was doing great, and left. The door clicked shut, and suddenly I felt like the room was smaller, tighter, as if the walls were leaning closer. My breathing became shallow, my hands trembled. The baby shifted in my arms, making a tiny sound somewhere between a whimper and a sigh, and something twisted inside me. Not love, not connection, but fear, raw, suffocating fear. What if this feeling never came? What if I was broken? What if something in me didn't turn on the way it should? I watched my daughter sleep, her chest rising and falling like the slowest rhythm in the world. I studied every detail, her soft eyelashes, her slightly crooked nose, the tiny birthmark on her cheek. I analyzed her like someone who was supposed to recognize her, but didn't. Then, the guilt hit. A guilt so heavy it felt like someone had placed a weight directly on my lungs, pressing until the air inside me thinned. I swallowed it down. I tried to shake it off. I told myself it was hormones, exhaustion, shock, anything to avoid facing the truth. I didn't feel the love I was told I would feel. A few hours later, my husband stepped out to call his parents, and suddenly it was just me and her. The silence was almost unbearable. She wriggled in my arms again, and for a moment I panicked, a rational panic, because I didn't know what she needed. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I didn't know if I even wanted to know. I repositioned her, trying to mimic what I'd seen other mothers do. Her cheek pressed against my chest, soft and warm, and for a moment I thought maybe something would stir. Maybe it would bloom late, but it didn't. The emptiness stayed. I felt tears welling up, not because I was moved, but because I was terrified of myself, terrified of this numbness, terrified of being the kind of mother who didn't feel what she was supposed to feel. A voice inside whispered, "Something is wrong with you." I tried to show the thought away, but it lingered, clinging to me like a shadow. I looked at my daughter again, feeling dizzy with the pressure of what I was supposed to be. The world outside expected love, tenderness, instinct. I had none of it. And that's when another thought crossed my mind, a darker one, crawling in slowly uninvited. If I don't love her now, will I ever? I blinked hard. The room blurred. The machines beeped in slow motion. The fluorescent lights hummed like a dull headache. My stomach twisted so violently I thought I might be sick. I wasn't supposed to think that. I wasn't supposed to be this kind of mother. I wasn't supposed to feel nothing. Someone knocked on the door and the sudden noise made me jump. It was the nurse again, cheerful, unaware, stepping in with paperwork and soft instructions. I straightened my back, adjusted the blankets, fixed my expression. The mask slid on icily, too icily. She talked about feeding schedules, diaper changes, postpartum symptoms, her voice a distant echo. I nodded in all the right places. She didn't notice my shaking hand. They didn't notice how tightly I held my breath. She didn't notice the storm inside me. No one noticed. When she left again, the silence returned. And the silence felt like judgment, cold, heavy, unforgiving. That's when I knew. Whatever this was, it wasn't going away quickly. And the worst part? This was only the beginning. If this story is touching you, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is right now. The next morning, the sunlight hit the edge of the curtain, a sliver of warmth slipping into the room like a quiet intruder. I had barely slept, maybe 20 minutes, maybe none at all. My eyes burned. My body ached in places I hadn't known existed before labor. But what hurt the most wasn't physical. It was the performance I knew I had to give again. There was a knock at the door, so soft, so polite, and then a nurse peeked her head in, all smiles and sunshine. "Good morning, Mama. How are we doing today?" I could have said, "I didn't sleep. I'm scared. I think something is broken in me." But instead, I smiled. I had practiced that smile in the mirror once in high school, when I was trying out for the school play. Back then, it was just acting. Now, it was survival. "We're good," I replied, voice steady. She slept a little. "I think she likes sleeping on my chest the most." The nurse beamed. "That's wonderful. You're already learning her preferences?" I nodded again, each lie layering itself over my truth like makeup over bruises. "Yeah, she's so calm." I looked down at my daughter, sleeping, tiny, innocent, and guilt knifed through me. How could I be lying about my own child? How could I smile like this when all I wanted to do was scream for help? But if I told the truth, if I said I feel nothing or I'm afraid of my own baby, what would happen? Would they take her from me? Would they put a note in my file? Would they call someone? So I kept lying. I answered every question with precision, like a student who had studied motherhood from a textbook. "How's breastfeeding going?" "Challenging, but I think we're getting it." "Are you bonding with her?" "Yes, I love skin to skin. It's magical." "Are you feeling okay emotionally?" "Oh yes, just tired." They believed me. Of course they did, because I looked the part. I had brushed my hair, changed into fresh pajamas, even put on lip balm. I looked like a woman adjusting to new motherhood, not a woman unraveling inside. I kept performing through the morning rounds, the paperwork, the visitors. My husband brought coffee and took pictures of me cradling her in the hospital bed, smiling like this was the best day of my life. He posted them to his family group chat. "She's glowing," his mom replied. If only they knew. Later, when he left to grab lunch, I stood by the mirror in the hospital bathroom, stared at my own reflection. My face was pale, my eyes sunken, my body a stranger. I looked like a shell, an echo of someone I used to be. And yet, I whispered to the mirror, rehearsing the lie one more time. "I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay." There was no one to hear it but me. And maybe that was the point. The third night in the hospital was the one that broke me. Everything felt heavier after sunset, as if the walls carried a different kind of silence, the kind that presses against your ribs and waits to see what you'll do with it. My daughter wouldn't stop crying. Nothing soothed her. Not rocking, not walking, not humming. My husband was asleep on the small couch across the room, his body curled under a thin hospital blanket. Every breath he took sounded deep, peaceful, untouched. Untouched by the storm consuming me. I kept bouncing her gently, trying to mimic the rhythm the nurse had shown me, but my arms shook from exhaustion. My stitches ached. My back throbbed. My eyes burned from being awake for what felt like days. When her cries climbed to a pitch that pierced the quiet, something in me snapped, not outwardly, but inside, like a rope finally breaking under too much tension. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding her against my chest, and whispered, "Stop, please, baby." The helplessness in my own voice scared me. I tried everything, again check her diaper, adjust the swaddle, feed her, even though my nipples were raw and throbbing and bleeding slightly. Nothing changed. Her tiny body kept shaking with sobs, her face turning red, her mouth open in the shape of a pain I couldn't understand. That's when the thought came. It didn't arrive like darkness or rage. It arrived quietly, like a whisper, like a shadow slipping under a door. What if I just put her down gently and walked away? Just walked away. Just for a moment. Just enough to breathe. Just enough to stop feeling like I was drowning. The scary part wasn't the thought itself. It was the relief it offered. A relief so immediate, so intoxicating, that I froze. I stared at her, this tiny, crying human who depended on me for everything, and for a split second. The sound of her wail felt like it was slicing me open from the inside. And the thought came again. Put her in the bassinet. Step away. Close the bathroom door. Just for a minute, maybe two, maybe longer. I could feel the edges of panic tightening around my throat. My hands trembled harder. My breathing became shallow and sharp. I looked across the room at my husband, the man who had promised to share this with me, and I felt a resentment I didn't recognize. He was sleeping. While I was falling apart, I wanted to wake him up, scream at him, shake him, tell him that something was wrong with me, that something dark was crawling through my mind and I didn't know how to stop it. But I didn't, because I didn't want him to see me like that. The crying got louder. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. My vision blurred around the edges, and the thought, the terrible, forbidden thought grew louder. Just walk away. You don't have to do this right now. I pressed my hand to my forehead, my palm shaking against my skin, and muttered, "Stop, stop." But the thought didn't stop. It multiplied. What if you're not meant to be her mother? What if she deserves someone better? What if you're going to mess her up? What if walking away is the kindest thing you could do for both of you? My body felt split in two, one half still holding her, rocking her, trying to soothe her, and the other half standing on the edge of a cliff inside my mind, staring into a future I didn't want to imagine. Her screams vibrated against my chest, and suddenly, an image flashed in my head, me placing her in the clear hospital bassinet, turning around, walking to the bathroom, closing the door, and sliding down the tile wall until I hit the floor. And staying there, not coming back, not answering the cries, not being needed. The image terrified me so much, I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to erase it. But it stayed. That was the moment I realized I was no longer in control of my thoughts. My breath hitched. I felt the room tilt slightly. My knees weakened, tears blurred my vision, and for the first time since she was born, I felt something other than numbness. I felt fear so intense I could taste it. "Please stop crying," I whispered again. But the words came out broken, like something had cracked inside my chest. I wanted to call the nurse. I wanted to call anyone. I wanted someone to take her from my arms so I could breathe, but I didn't. Because that same dark whisper said, "If they know what you're thinking, they'll take her away." And that thought was worse than all the others. My daughter cried harder. My heart pounded faster. My skin felt too tight for my body. And I realized no one was coming to save me. Nobody knew I was drowning. So I held her and rocked her. and cried silently, tears falling onto her soft forehead as guilt and terror tangled inside me. And in the middle of that night and that suffocating, lonely, fluorescent-lit room, I understood something I wish I had known sooner. Sometimes the scariest part of postpartum isn't what you do. It's the thoughts you're too afraid to admit you had. Going home was supposed to feel like relief, like stepping back into a life I recognized. But the moment we walked through the front door, I felt something else entirely. I felt the performance begin again. My husband carried the bags. I carried her. And the weight of pretending settled on my shoulders the second I crossed the threshold. The house smelled exactly the same as when we had left for the hospital lavender candle. Laundry detergent, the faint scent of our caramel-colored couch. But I didn't feel like I belonged in that version of my life anymore. I felt like an imposter wearing the body of someone who used to live here. That first afternoon, friends and family sent voice messages, asking for photos, asking how I felt, asking how the beautiful bonding experience was going. I gave the same answer every time. We're so happy. She's perfect. A lie dressed up like a celebration. Every time someone called, I switched on the voice of a new mother glowing with love. I laughed softly. I said all the right things. I hid the trembling in my hands by holding the phone with both of them. Even my husband didn't notice. He was exhausted too, in his own way, but he still touched her with a gentleness that made something inside me twist. He seemed connected to her in a way I wasn't. When he looked at her, his whole face softened. When I looked at her, I felt panic and guilt wrestling inside me like two animals fighting for space. The worst part was acting like everything was normal. I smiled during diaper changes. I pretended breastfeeding wasn't excruciating. I nodded when my husband said, "You're doing amazing." I posted a picture of her sleeping on my chest because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. The comments poured in. "You look so happy. You were made for this. You must be in love." Each one felt like a blade, but I kept lying because the truth felt too dangerous to say out loud. If I said it even once, it might become real. It might define me forever. At night, when the house darkened and I was left alone with her again, the mask slipped. Not completely, but enough for me to feel the edges of my fear pressing through. She cried more at home than she did in the hospital. Or maybe it just felt louder in the silence of our bedroom. Every time her voice cracked into a scream, something inside me clenched, as if my body was bracing for impact. But the moment anyone entered the room, my husband, my sister, even the neighbor who dropped off food, I pulled the mask back on. My voice steadied. My hands stopped shaking. I rehearsed the lines I had already memorized. "I'm fine. She's just a little fussy. We're adjusting. Adjusting. Adjusting." Another lie wrapped in softness. I wasn't adjusting. I was unraveling quietly, hoping no one would notice. It took me 6 days to gather the courage. 6 days of crying in silence, of pretending, of wearing the same sweatshirt with milk stains and the same forced smile. 6 days of fighting the thoughts in my head. 6 days of hoping someone would notice without me having to say the words. On the 6th night, after I managed to put the baby down for what I knew would be 20, maybe 30 minutes of sleep, I sat on the edge of our bed and whispered, "I need to talk." My husband looked up from his phone, concerned. "Is something wrong?" I hesitated. Everything inside me screamed, "Don't ruin this moment. Don't make it worse. Don't sound crazy." But I spoke anyway. "I think something's wrong with me," I said softly. "I don't feel what I thought I'd feel. I'm scared. I'm not connecting with her the way I should. Sometimes I feel like I want to disappear. Or, like, maybe she'd be better off without me." Silence. He stared at me for a moment. Then he rubbed his eyes and said, "Babe, you're just tired. Everyone feels overwhelmed at first. You'll feel better soon." I blinked. That wasn't what I needed. I needed him to look into my eyes and say, "I believe you." I needed him to stay awake with me in the dark, but he turned the lamp off and rolled over. The next morning, I tried again. I told my mother-in-law I was feeling off, that I was sad most of the time, that I wasn't sleeping even when the baby did. She looked at me over her coffee mug and said, "You're just being dramatic. You're too sensitive. This is motherhood. Welcome to real life." That word hit hard dramatic. It made me feel like everything I was feeling was fabricated, exaggerated, dismissible. I smiled, nodded, and excused myself to the bathroom where I sat on the cold tile floor, knees to my chest, and let the silence swallow me. I had tried, I had spoken, and I had been silenced, not with cruelty, but with minimization. With that calm, patronizing tone people use when they don't want to deal with your pain. That was the moment I decided not to try again. If my husband couldn't hear me, if his mother thought I was fragile, then maybe I was. Maybe I really was broken. So I did what I had learned to do best. I went quiet. I went invisible. I smiled bigger. I lied louder. And no one asked again. I didn't mean for the secret to grow roots. I didn't mean for it to become something I carried into every room, every season, every version of myself that came after. But that's the thing about unspoken thoughts. They don't disappear. They hide. They echo. They wait. The weeks after those first failed attempts to open up blurred into one long stretch of survival. Days and nights twisted into each other until I couldn't tell where one ended and the next began. I fed her, bathed her, rocked her, changed her, held her. And the whole time that terrible night, the crying, the panic, the dark thought haunted me like a ghost that refused to leave. I buried it so deep, I convinced myself it was gone. But it wasn't. It lived in the corners of my mind. In every moment I felt overwhelmed. In every time I reached my limit. In every photo where I forced a smile so wide my cheeks hurt. When she turned 6 months, people kept saying, "You seem so happy now." I nodded. I laughed. I played along. But the truth was that I had become skilled at hiding the fracture inside me. The fear of being a bad mother didn't disappear, it just changed shape. It became this quiet, constant hum beneath everything I did. If she cried for too long, the memory returned. If I snapped out of exhaustion, the guilt resurfaced. If I dared to imagine a life where I wasn't drowning, shame washed over me instantly. And still, I said nothing. Years passed. Yes, birthdays, holidays, first words, first steps. The world saw a mother who was gentle and patient and present. The kind of mother who read bedtime stories and packed lunches and took photos of painted little hands. But inside, that secret, the thought from that night, sat like a stone at the bottom of my chest. Every milestone she reached made the guilt grow heavier, not lighter. Because the older she got, the more I wondered, how could I have ever thought something like that? What kind of mother even imagines walking away from her child? I tried to forgive myself, but forgiveness never stuck. I tried to forget, but forgetting never lasted. I tried to drown the memory, but it always floated back up. So I learned to live with it. The secret became a silent companion, welcome but familiar. Strangely, she grew into a bright, loving child. She hugged me fiercely, laughed loudly, trusted me completely. She had no idea how broken I had felt in the beginning. And that innocence both healed and hurt me. Some nights, after she fell asleep, I would sit beside her bed and watch her breathe. And the old fear would return in a whisper. If she ever knew the truth, would she still love me? And so I kept the secret buried, year after year, smile after smile, until the day everything changed. It happened on a day that began like any other, ordinary, quiet, deceptively simple. My daughter was 4 years old enough to form full sentences, old enough to run into my arms after preschool and say, "I missed you today, Mommy," old enough to make me wonder how a love so deep could have ever felt so distant. We were in the kitchen that afternoon. She sat at the table drawing, legs dangling off the chair, humming a tune she must have heard in class. I was slicing strawberries, watching her from the corner of my eye the way mothers do half lovingly, half protectively, half memorizing every second because childhood slips away faster than anyone warned. "Mommy?" she asked suddenly, her voice soft but curious. "Yes, baby? Why do you always look sad at night?" The knife froze in my hand. I didn't know she noticed. I didn't think anyone had. I'd gotten so good at pretending during the days, smiling through routines, laughing at her silly jokes, being the mother I had taught myself to become. But nights were different. Nights were when the secret crawled back up my throat. Nights were when the memory replayed itself like a film that refused to be deleted. "Do I look sad?" I asked carefully, forcing a smile. She nodded, drawing a circle on her paper. "Sometimes you sit on the couch and stare at nothing. Like you're thinking really, really hard. Children see everything." I placed the knife down, suddenly aware of how quiet the house felt. No TV, no music, no background noise to hide behind. Just her voice, and the truth I had swallowed for years pressing against my ribs. "Come here," I whispered. She climbed onto my lap, her tiny body warm, her hair smelling like school paint and sunshine. She wrapped her arms around my neck the way she always did, without hesitation, without doubt, without ever imagining there were parts of me I still didn't know how to love. I held her tightly, my chin resting on her head, and for a moment, I felt the years folding into each other. The hospital room, the crying nights, the guilt, the fear, the lie I had lived with for so long. The secret pulsed in my chest, begging to be released. And for the first time ever, I didn't push it away. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat alone in the living room. The lamp glowed softly beside me, casting warm shadows against the wall. I felt something shifting inside me, like a door creaking open after being shut for too long. My husband walked in, rubbing the back of his neck. "Long day?" I nodded. He sat beside me, his body sinking into the couch cushion with a sigh. We were quiet for a long moment. Then he said, out of nowhere, "She told me she's worried about you." My heart clenched. "She did?" He nodded. "She said you look sad sometimes, and she asked if she did something wrong." Those words broke something in me, something I had fortified for years. Tears filled my eyes before I could hide them. I turned away, ashamed, but he gently took my hand. "Hey, what's going on?" There it was. The opening. The moment I had prayed for years ago. The question I had begged for in the dark. This time, I didn't silence myself. This time, I didn't lie. My voice trembled as I whispered, "Something happened after she was born. Something I never told anyone." He leaned closer, his expression soft, the same softness he used to reserve for the baby in early days. "You can tell me." And so, I finally did. I told him about the emptiness in the hospital, about the numbness, about the crying nights, about the fear, about the moment I thought of walking away, about the shame I carried like a second skin, about how I felt like a monster. For years, the words spilled out of me, messy and raw and terrifying. I expected judgment, anger, shock, but when I finished, he didn't recoil. He didn't look at me differently. He didn't call me dramatic. He took my hand tighter and said, "You should have told me. I'm so sorry you went through all that alone." Those simple words, those human, imperfect words, felt like a key turning inside me. I sobbed, not because I was weak, but because the weight I'd been carrying for 4 years finally loosened. We talked for hours that night about postpartum depression, about intrusive thoughts, about the silence that had grown between us because neither of us knew how to cross it. And when I went to check on my daughter later, I found her curled up with her stuffed rabbit, breathing softly, her innocence glowing in the half-light. I sat beside her bed and gently stroked her hair. For the first time since she was born, I whispered, "I forgive myself." It wasn't perfect. It wasn't complete, but it was a beginning. And beginnings, I've learned, can be just as powerful as endings. I kissed her forehead and whispered the truth I had feared for years. "You saved me, even when you didn't know it." I used to think that the worst part of postpartum was the thought I had, the one that haunted me, the one I buried so deeply I forgot where I put it. But now I know the truth. The worst part wasn't the thought itself, it was surviving it alone. Silence can wound more than the darkest moment. Shame can suffocate faster than exhaustion. And pretending to be fine can carve holes in a person no one sees, until they're too deep to hide. But something changed the day I finally said it out loud. Not because the memory disappeared, it didn't. Not because the guilt evaporated, it hasn't. But because the secret stopped growing in the dark. When truth meets air, it stops being poison. I wish I could go back to that night in the hospital, the fluorescent lights humming above me, her cries echoing in the room, my own heartbeat thundering with fear, and tell myself, "You're not a bad mother. You're a mother who needs help." I wish I could tell that version of me that intrusive thoughts don't define your heart. That numbness is not the absence of love. Sometimes it's the shock of too much. That asking for help is not weakness, it's survival. But since I can't go back, I can only move forward. And now, when my daughter laughs, when she runs into my arms, when she falls asleep on my chest, the way she used to as a newborn, the memory still sits there, quiet and small, but no longer in control. It's just a moment, a painful one, a true one, but just a moment, not a definition. If you're listening to this and something inside you feels familiar, if you've ever had a thought that scared you, or felt a numbness you couldn't explain, or buried a fear so deep you hoped no one would ever find it, let me tell you what I wish someone had told me. You are not broken. You are not alone. And you are still a good mother, even on your darkest day. Before you leave this video, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Because maybe, just maybe, speaking it out loud is the first step to being free.